So we're here with my sister, who is going to interview me for part two of our interview segment. So you guys can get to know me a little bit better.
Ready?
Yep.
All right. So what's your favorite thing about martial arts?
I think probably that if it's done right, it can be very empowering to people.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say if you have a realistic method of feedback, and usually we mean like harder sparring, randori, which is the judo exercise where you grab each other and toss each other around, things like that. Those are things that can manifest themselves in actual conflict. So at the very least, it's like, oh, I got punched in the face. Wait, I've been punched in the face before in training. You know, I know what that feels like. I'm not going to panic. You know, or somebody grabs you in a headlock, like, okay, I've been here a dozen times in class before. This is no big deal. So in that sense, I think it can give people a sense of confidence because, again, they've been in these hazardous situations and found a way to sort of navigate their way through.
The practice of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Nice. What's your least favorite thing about your channel?
The editing process. That's pretty much it. I love recording. I love, creating outlines for all of these and talking about martial arts, talking about all these books and sharing with the audience like, hey, did you see this thing? Do you know what, if you pick up this book, what could you get from it? And what are the benefits of reading this thing? And, those things are all fun. And then it comes time to actually like edit it together. It's like, as part of my process for any hard copy book, basically I have to like take a picture, when I put the pictures in the video.
Yeah.
I have to take a picture on my phone, email it to me, download it on the computer, and then crop it on the computer. So it's a long, tedious process, and it can be a pain in the butt.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Rather just, here's the knowledge, guys.
Yeah.
Why do I have to edit?
Yeah. I guess I could do that, but, excuse me. I do prefer to, like, insert the pictures so that people actually see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, gotcha. Makes sense. I imagine they appreciate it too. How is your illness affecting your training?
I've had zero formal training the last few years. Outside of a few seminars, which I do try to get to when I can, I'm wearing gloves. This is because of neuropathy. So very sensitive to cold. It'll give me this pins and needles sensation in my fingers. But if we back up, I think like the first signs of my illness were just high levels of fatigue.
Yeah.
So I'm at work. My job isn't that physically taxing. Basically taking a shopping cart down a few aisles and pulling a few like very light items off, and by the end of the day I'd have to sit down because I was getting exhausted. And first thing, once I got insurance and was able to do stuff with that, first thing we did was some blood tests that showed that I was anemic and hypoglycemic, and so the cancers were absorbing the sugars. And there was also some internal bleeding. And of course, once I got diagnosed with cancer, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. But yeah, it's drained me of a lot of my energy.
You're literally in kind of a different kind of fight these days.
Yeah, and I'm noticeably smaller than I used to be.
Yeah.
When I started this channel, I was overweight. I was about 220, I think at my heaviest maybe. And right now I'm under 120 pounds. And of course, part of our process in dealing with this is not only going through the chemo, which can also be exhausting and taxing, but is also trying to like put more weight back on me.
Yeah.
I'm a little dude now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it's affected my training. It's just robbed me of my energy. It's made it so hard to do anything. You know, even some of the solo stuff that I want to do, like the solo kata, I'll do a couple reps of that and then just, wow, that took a lot out of me. You know, like even recording this is going to take kind of a lot out of me.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's how it's affected my training. It's basically robbed me of my energy.
Gotcha.
That's the biggest point.
Okay. What's something you wish was different about the martial arts world?
Um, the first thing that stands out is in every hierarchical structure, the people in power can abuse their positions of power.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the martial arts world, this can manifest itself in like cult-like behavior. Unfortunately, it also manifests itself in like adults victimizing children.
Mm.
And if I had to pick absolutely one thing, I would definitely change that so that that didn't happen.
I hear that.
From a slightly different perspective, I wish that um, when people trained in martial arts, they would recognize what they're training in.
Hmm.
Because, you know, I mentioned up front about using certain metrics to empower oneself.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that there's a lot of activities we do in martial arts that sort of have the promise of that, but don't deliver on it.
Okay.
You know, like if I'm just punching and kicking the air, you know, or I'm doing drills where my attacker throws a punch and then freezes, and I do like 7 different moves on him.
That doesn't happen in reality?
That doesn't happen. So, but there are people who believe that that will translate into having practical fighting skills.
Gotcha.
You know, and you know, similarly, there are, you know, as much as I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's a sport. The way it's trained, by and large, is as a sport, and it's like Jiu-Jitsu versus Jiu-Jitsu guys. Same thing with judo, boxing, and again, some of those, because they have that feedback loop in certain scenarios, carry that earned sense of confidence. But for instance, in the jiu-jitsu world, you know, once they get to the ground, you're toast.
Mm.
Try to get past the punches and get to the ground first. You know, that's not trained now as much as it was in the 90s, from what I understand.
Okay.
You know, in the 90s it was a fight. You know, now it's more of a sport.
Gotcha.
So, as long as people realize what they have and the skills they're actually building and the skills that they're not building.
So being aware of those
Yeah. So
gaps.
yeah. So that's important to me on some level. Less important, I guess, than, you know, like no child molesters.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Why?
But you know, it is something that I tend to encounter more are the people who, you know, like, oh, well, we train in such and such, and you know, we're really good at doing 72 kinds of forms. Like, okay, can you fight? You know, if that's what you're talking about is your ability to fight as opposed to doing forms, which is a skill unto itself.
Yeah.
You know, and it can be useful, and you can take some of those aspects and make them practical. But, you know, just make sure people know what they actually are training in.
Gotcha. Good stuff. I think that's one of the things I admire about you is you like to take all of the info from every little bit and like fill in the gaps from other aspects of martial arts.
Yeah, like it took me years to realize that what I actually want to do is learn everything there is to know about martial arts.
Hence the library.
Hence the library. But yeah, a lot of that is figuring out, like, you know, what is my goal with this skill, and how can I achieve that goal with this skill, you know, and to that end, like, you know, I'll play around with anything, man. You know, you know, when I have had the opportunity to have, you know, training partners that were willing to help me out. Like I'd flip through a book on karate or silat or, aikido, and, pick a technique and like, okay, I think I can see how we can fit this into what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah. So, let's put on the gloves and the mouth guard and let's give it a shot, right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. What are your favorite memories regarding martial arts?
Well, passing my black belt test. That was a pretty big one.
Heck yeah.
So that was a measurable goal, right? Get my
Yeah.
black belt. So I was happy to get my black belt in martial arts. Also, honestly, just a lot of the friends that I've met through martial arts and a lot of the people.
Kind of your own little community or family of folks, huh?
Yeah. Like, for instance, Mark Hatmaker was an author who I admired. We had a chance meeting at Karate College 2005, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And, that began a friendship.
Yeah.
To this day, like when I got diagnosed, he was one of the first people to call me. Yeah. So, that meant a lot. So things like that. And God, some of the, I'm trying to think. When I got married, I had 4 groomsmen, and 3 of them had become my friends basically through martial arts.
That's cool.
Yeah. There was one guy who we trained at the same place together, and 2 other folks who got into martial arts because I kept choking them out. Well, one. I have one roommate who was, who got into jiu-jitsu because of that, and then another one got into boxing because he saw me, shadow boxing in an area. He's like, hey, show me how to do some of that.
Cool.
Yeah. They all ended up being some pretty cool guys, but again, 3 out of the 4 people who were closest to me in that environment came from my experience in martial arts. So it is a bonding experience in a lot of cases.
I hear that. Sounds like it. That's awesome. All right, let's see. What do you look for in an instructional book? You have so many of them.
I think the best instructional books are going to have multiple color pictures from different angles.
You can kind of see something from so you can see what it looks like.
Right. They should. The person you're following should be distinguished from their demo dummy. So instead of like 2 people in white gis with black belts, like, okay, which one of these guys am I supposed to be looking at? Mm-hmm. Somebody in like a black gi and somebody in a white gi, and you're like, white gi does such and such, and black gi responds with it. Like, okay, I can follow that a little bit easier. I think that videos are probably better for picking up movement in martial arts. So to that end, I think an instructional book, it's helpful with its text to explain the principles behind the movements and the ideas behind what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. All right. I think that's all we got. So thank you guys for following along.
Bye, guys.